I woke up in my boss's bed with no memory of how I got there. She walked in with 2 coffees and said, "You really don't remember last night. You told me you loved me. Then you asked if I wanted to go out with me." My stomach dropped. Then she smiled and said, and I said yes. What followed was 3 weeks of pretending nothing had happened, a company reorganization that could end both our careers, and a job offer 2,000 miles away that almost made me walk away from the best thing that ever slipped out of my mouth drunk. Here's exactly what happened. I woke up staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize with a dull headache behind my eyes and the faint smell of coffee drifting through an open bedroom door. For 3 confused seconds, I thought I was in a hotel. Then I saw the navy blazer hanging over the back of a chair. The same blazer my boss, Margot Sinclair, had worn to our company launch party the night before. I sat up so fast the room tilted. Margot appeared in the doorway wearing gray sweatpants and an oversized white t-shirt, a coffee mug in each hand. Her dark hair was tied loosely behind her head, and instead of looking angry, embarrassed, or horrified, she smiled. "You really don't remember last night?" she asked. My stomach dropped. "Remember what?" She leaned against the doorframe, studying me for a moment. "You told me you loved me, Julian. Then you asked if I wanted to go out with you." I could barely breathe. "I did what?" Her smile softened, and I said yes. The first thing I did was look down at myself. Jeans, t-shirt, socks, everything was exactly where it was supposed to be except for my shoes, which were lined up neatly beside Margot's bedroom door. She noticed where my eyes went and raised one eyebrow. "Relax," she said. "You slept in the bed." "I slept on the couch. That somehow makes this both better and worse. It should only make it better, right?" "Yes, of course." I took the coffee she offered me because my hands needed something to do. Margot walked to the window and pulled the curtain open. Saturday morning light spilled across the room. Her apartment was on the 12th floor of a building near Lake Union, and beyond the glass, Seattle looked washed clean after a night of rain. I had worked for Margot for 11 months. Until that morning, I had never seen her without the sharp lines of office clothes, a laptop under one arm, and the expression of someone mentally already running 3 meetings ahead of everyone else. At 26, she was 4 years younger than I was, and still the most capable manager I had worked for. That fact annoyed some people at Northgate Labs more than they admitted. They saw her age first. I saw the person who could walk into a product review with 6 executives, dismantle a bad strategy without humiliating anyone, then stay until midnight helping a junior designer fix a presentation. I had spent most of the past year trying very hard not to notice how beautiful she was. I had failed completely. Apparently, sometime between the second whiskey and waking up in her bed, I had also failed to keep that information private. I stared into my coffee. How bad was I? Define bad. That is not reassuring. She sat on the edge of the chair across from me. "You weren't out of control. You were just unusually honest." I closed my eyes. A few fragments from the night before floated back. The restaurant above Elliott Bay, our product team celebrating the launch of an app we had spent 8 months building. Desmond from engineering ordering a round after our CEO announced we had exceeded our first quarter adoption target. Margot laughing when someone put a paper crown on her head. After that, pieces. Music and elevator, cold air, Margot saying my name. Then nothing. "Why am I here?" I asked. "You got sick in the parking garage." I groaned. "You didn't throw up on me." "Small victories. You kept insisting you were fine to go home, but your place is 35 minutes away, and mine is 6. I wasn't putting you alone in a rideshare when you could barely remember your apartment number." "I know my apartment number. This morning, maybe." I covered my face with one hand. She laughed quietly, and the sound did something inconvenient to my chest. "Margot, I'm sorry." "For what?" "For putting you in this position. You're my boss. I got drunk, told you I loved you, apparently asked you out, and then passed out in your bed. You're skipping the part where I answered." I looked at her. She held my gaze without smiling now. "You really said yes?" "Yes." "Why?" The question came out before I could stop it. Something changed in her face, not hurt exactly, but a small retreat. "Because I wanted to." I felt every remaining trace of alcohol leave my system. For months, I had convinced myself that whatever existed between us lived entirely in my imagination. The extra half-second when she looked at me after I made her laugh, the way she remembered I hated cilantro, the night she sent me a message at 11:47 p.m. After a difficult client call that said, "You were right to push back, don't second-guess yourself." Professional kindness, I told myself. Good leadership, nothing more. And now she was sitting 3 feet away from me in her apartment, saying she had wanted to say yes. I should have been happy. Instead, panic hit me from a completely different direction. You're my direct manager, I'm aware. If anyone finds out, I'm aware of that too. And I was drunk. That part is exactly why nothing happened. I looked up. Margot set her coffee down. You asked me if I would go on a real date with you, she said. I said yes. Then I told you I wanted you to ask me again when you were sober. You nodded very seriously, told me that was fair, and then spent 5 minutes explaining why you respected me. I stared at her. How drunk was I? Drunk enough to forget the conversation, sober enough to give a surprisingly organized speech about workplace ethics. Despite myself, I laughed. She did too. The tension broke for 2 seconds, then she said, "So ask me again." I went still. There it was. No alcohol, no music, no coworkers, no excuse, just Margot sitting in front of me waiting. The answer should have been obvious. I had wanted this woman for months. I had imagined taking her to dinner, walking beside her without pretending we were discussing work, finding out what she looked like when she didn't have to be responsible for 23 people. But reality came with consequences imagination never had. Margot had fought hard for her position. I knew that because I had watched her do it. I also knew our company policy required disclosure of any relationship involving a direct reporting line. Even if both people consented, one of them had to be reassigned. I was being considered for a principal designer role on her team. She was rumored to be in line for director. One wrong decision could turn something private into gossip about favoritism, power, and whether either of us had earned what came next. I put the coffee down. I want to, I said. Her expression changed, but I don't want the first thing I do after realizing you feel the same way to be making your career harder. Margot was quiet for a moment, then she stood. Come on, where? Kitchen. I made eggs. That is either a very kind response or a strategic way to avoid answering me. It can be both. I followed her because apparently that was what my life had become. Her kitchen was smaller than I expected, bright and organized without looking staged. A bowl of lemons sat beside the sink. 3 magnets held handwritten notes to the refrigerator. One said, "Call Mom." Another said, "Don't forget dry cleaning." The third was a terrible drawing of a cat. I pointed at it. Yours, my niece's. You have a niece. You've worked for me almost a year. You have never once discussed your family. You have never once asked. Fair. She slid a plate toward me. For a few minutes we ate in a silence that should have been awkward, but wasn't. Finally, Margot folded her hands on the counter. There's something you don't know. My heart immediately began preparing for disaster. What? 3 weeks ago, I applied for the product director position in the new customer experience division. I blinked. That's the role in the reorganization. Yes, if you get it, you won't manage our team anymore. No, I stared at her. She watched me understand. You knew this last night, yes. So when you said yes, I knew there was a possibility that in a few weeks the reporting issue wouldn't exist. A possibility, a strong one. How strong? She took a breath. Final interview is Monday. I leaned back on the stool. This should have made everything simpler. Instead, it explained something I had noticed over the last month. Margot taking calls behind closed doors, meeting with the COO. Asking me more questions about how independently our design group could function. I had assumed she was preparing for budget cuts. She had been preparing to leave our reporting chain. Why didn't you tell the team? Because it isn't final. And I didn't want people adjusting to a change that might not happen. That sounds like you. I'm choosing to take that as a compliment. It is. She smiled, then looked down at her coffee. The job matters to me, Julian. I know. I don't want anyone saying I moved divisions because of you. I would never ask you to. I know that. 2. That answer mattered more than she probably realized. She looked back at me. And I don't want you taking yourself out of consideration for principal designer because of me. I wasn't planning to. Good. Margot, yes, I still want to ask you. Her fingers tightened. Slightly around the mug. But not today. The light in her face dimmed just enough for me to regret the words. I continued quickly. Not because I'm unsure. I'm very sure, probably embarrassingly sure. But you have your final interview Monday. I have my promotion review next week. If we start something right now, every decision either of us makes gets tangled with the other. She studied me. So what are you proposing? 3 weeks, 3 weeks, until the reorganization is announced. And if I don't get the job, I hated the question because I had no clean answer. Then we figure it out sober. A smile returned, shorter this time. Sober, you say that word as if you've discovered it. I'm trying to rebuild my reputation. You told a decorative ficus you respected its boundaries last night. I stared at her. She finally laughed. I pointed at her. You promised organized. I said surprisingly organized. I did not say dignified. I laughed too, and for the first time that morning, the fear loosened its grip. 3 weeks. It sounded reasonable, responsible, safe. I had no idea those 3 weeks would become the hardest part. Monday morning, Margot became my boss again so completely that I almost wondered whether Saturday had happened. At 8:42, she walked into our weekly planning meeting in a charcoal blazer, set her laptop on the table, and said, "We have 12 days to get the onboarding redesign ready for executive review. Julian, I want the revised prototype by Thursday." No smile, no secret look, nothing. I should have appreciated her professionalism. Instead, I spent the first 10 minutes wondering whether the woman who had made me eggs 2 days earlier had been replaced by an extremely efficient twin. Then halfway through the meeting, I opened my notebook and found a yellow sticky note tucked inside. "Drink water today," underneath in smaller handwriting, and "no proposing to office plants." I looked up. Margot was explaining a timeline to Desmond without looking at me. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. That became the pattern. In public, we were exactly what we had always been, manager and employee. In private, tiny cracks appeared. She would message me after a late meeting. "Did you eat?" I would leave a peppermint tea on her desk before presentations because I knew she drank it when she was nervous. She would correct my typography choices with ruthless precision, then add a smiley face to the comment because she knew it annoyed me. I would pretend to be offended. None of it was technically romantic. All of it felt romantic. The problem was that once I knew she had said yes, every ordinary moment carried a second meaning. 3 days after her interview, we were working late in a conference room when she closed her laptop and leaned back. "You're staring," I'm thinking, at my face. The answer happened to be located in that direction. "That may be the worst defense I've heard this week." I smiled. She looked tired, not fragile. Margot never looked fragile, but drained in the way competent people often do when everyone assumes competence means endless capacity. "How did the interview go?" I asked. Her gaze moved to the dark window. "I don't know, that sounds unlike you." It felt strong, which makes me distrust it. Why? Because I wanted it too much. That was the first time she had said it that plainly. I closed my laptop. "What do you want about it?" She looked at me. "You mean besides not being your boss?" "I mean professionally." Her expression softened. "The new division gets to build from zero. New research model, new product structure, new hiring plan. I'd get to choose how the team works instead of inheriting systems that everyone complains about. But nobody changes. You'd be good at that. You don't have to say that." "I know." She studied me for a second, then she said, "My father thinks I'm moving too fast." That surprised me. "Your father," he ran operations for a manufacturing company for 30 years. "He thinks people should spend a decade proving themselves before they lead anything. And you, I think leadership is a skill, not an anniversary gift." "That sounds more like you." She smiled. "He loves me, he just thinks ambition makes people impatient." "Does it?" "Sometimes. And sometimes people who waited 10 years resent someone who only needed 5. She looked at me more sharply. That sounded personal. It is. I told her something I had never told anyone at Northgate. At my previous company, I had spent 4 years doing senior-level work without the title because my manager kept telling me I needed more seasoning. When the role finally opened, they hired someone from outside with less experience than I had. That was why I left. Margot listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "That explains why you never ask about your promotion." I ask. "You make arguments about team structure. You present performance data. You never say, 'I want this.'" I looked at the table. She had caught me. "I want it. Say it like you mean it." I met her eyes. "I want to be principal designer." "Why?" "Because I'm already doing half the job. Because I can mentor the junior team without micromanaging them. Because I'm tired of waiting for someone else to decide when I'm allowed to believe I'm ready." The room went quiet. Margot nodded once. "Good. Was that a management exercise?" "Maybe. That feels manipulative. It's called coaching. You're impossible. and yet, apparently, you love me. My brain stopped. She seemed to realize what she had said at the same moment I did. For the first time since I had known her, Margot Sinclair actually blushed. I leaned back slowly. You are never going to let me forget that, are you? Her eyes narrowed with amusement. You're the one who forgot it. That line stayed with me all week. So did the look on her face after she said it. By Friday, the problem was no longer whether I wanted to date Margot. The problem was how badly. I started counting days without meaning to. 14 until the reorganization announcement, then 13, then 12. On the 11th day, reality intruded. Desmond dropped into the chair beside me at lunch and said, "So, you and Margot leave together Friday." I nearly inhaled a piece of chicken. What? The launch party. I saw you two heading toward the garage. She made sure I got home safely. Desmond grinned. Home? I looked at him. His grin faded. Okay, sorry. Desmond was 37, married, and usually smarter than this. I lowered my voice. She's my manager, I know. Then don't turn basic human decency into something else. He raised both hands. Fair. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. The following Monday, our vice president of product, Renata Shaw, asked me to stop by her office. Renata was not intimidating in the obvious way. She spoke softly, wore bright sneakers with expensive suits, and had the unnerving habit of letting silence do half her work. She gestured for me to sit. Julian, I want to talk about the principal designer opening. My pulse jumped. Okay, you're the leading internal candidate. I tried not to react too much. Thank you, that's not an offer yet. Understood. She folded her hands. There's also a reporting question. Depending on how the reorganization lands, your team may move under a new manager. I knew immediately what she meant. Margot's interview had gone well, possibly very well. I kept my face neutral. Renata continued, "You've worked closely with Margot. I want your assessment of whether the team can operate effectively through that transition." I answered honestly. Yes, why? Because she built systems that don't depend on her being in every room. That's one of the reasons the team works. Renata nodded. And if she moves, I'd miss working for her. The sentence felt dangerous, even though it was completely true. But the team would be fine, I added, and she'd be good in the new role. Renata watched me for a beat. Good answer. When I left, Margot was standing at the far end of the hallway talking to legal counsel. Our eyes met for less than a second. She gave me nothing. That afternoon, I received an email from a recruiter in Austin. I had forgotten I had spoken to him 2 months earlier. At the time, I had been frustrated about how slowly my promotion was moving. He had mentioned a design director role at a healthcare startup. I had told him I wasn't actively looking, but would listen if something compelling appeared. Now something had. The salary was 28% higher than mine. The title was better than the one I was waiting for. The message ended with, "If you're open, they'd like to move quickly." I closed the email, then opened it again. For the first time in weeks, the future split into two visible roads. One kept me in Seattle, possibly promoted, possibly dating Margot. The other gave me everything I had said I wanted before I ever knew she wanted me back. I told myself it was useful to have options. I didn't tell Margot. That was my first mistake. My second came 3 days later. The onboarding redesign hit a problem no one had expected. A user research study came back showing that the feature our executives loved most was confusing nearly half of first-time customers. We had 9 days before the board demo. Margot called an emergency meeting. "We can patch the interface," Desmond said. "Keep the architecture." "No," I said. Everyone looked at me. I pulled the research clips onto the screen. "The problem isn't labeling. The mental model is wrong." Margot's face tightened because she knew what that meant. A real fix would require rebuilding almost everything we had prepared. "How long?" she asked. 7 days if design and engineering work in parallel. Desmond laughed without humor. 7 days if none of us sleep. We don't need perfection, I said. We need something users understand. Margot stood at the head of the table, thinking. This was the kind of moment people misunderstood about leadership. There was no perfect answer. Only consequences you chose on purpose. Finally, she said, we rebuild. For the next 6 days, our team practically lived at the office, and whatever careful distance Margot and I had maintained began to erode. Not because we crossed a physical line, but because pressure strips people down to what is real. At midnight Tuesday, she brought sandwiches to the design room without asking anyone what they wanted because she already knew. At 2:00 Wednesday morning, I found her sitting alone on the floor outside a conference room, shoes off, staring at a spreadsheet. "You okay?" I asked. "No." I sat beside her. She handed me the laptop. Finance had cut 2 positions from the staffing plan for the division she was interviewing to lead. "You haven't even gotten the job yet, and they're already making it worse. That's corporate efficiency. You can say no to the job, to the staffing model." She looked at me. "You think I should fight before they've even offered it? I think if they want you, they should want your judgment." For a moment she said nothing, then she closed the laptop. "You do that, what, make me braver and then act like you didn't." I smiled. Occupational hazard. Her shoulder rested against mine. Neither of us moved. It was the closest we had been since her apartment. She said quietly, 8 days. I knew exactly what she meant. "Until the announcement, assuming there is one, there will be, you're very confident. I have inside information." She turned her head. "From whom?" "My boss. She's terrifyingly qualified." That earned a tired laugh, then her expression changed. "Julian, yeah, when the 3 weeks are over." "I don't want you asking because you think you owe me an answer." "I won't. And I don't want you asking because of what you said that night." "I won't. I want you to ask because you still want to." I looked directly at her. That is the least complicated part of this. The room around us was silent except for the HVAC system and the faint tapping of keyboards down the hall. Margot looked away first. "Good," she said. I thought I had reassured her. I didn't realize she had already started to suspect I was preparing to leave. The suspicion started with a calendar invitation. I had scheduled a video call with the Austin company for Thursday at 4:00. I used a private meeting room and marked the event as personal, which should have been invisible to anyone except me. But at 3:55, Margot walked past the glass wall while I was waiting for the call to start. She saw me in a jacket. That alone meant nothing. Then the recruiter's face appeared on the monitor beside a slide that read, "North Star Health Design Director." Margot stopped walking. Our eyes met through the glass. She kept going. My stomach sank. I considered canceling the interview. Then I heard her voice in my head from the conference room days earlier. "I want you to ask because you still want to." Not because I owed her anything. Not because she owed me anything. I stayed. The interview lasted 50 minutes. They liked me. I liked them. The role was real. The work sounded meaningful. And by the end, the hiring manager said they wanted me in Austin the following week for a final conversation. When I stepped into the hallway, most of the office had emptied. Margot's door was still open. I stood there for a moment, then knocked. "Come in." Her tone was neutral, too neutral. I closed the door behind me. "You saw?" "Yes, I should have told you." "Yes." I waited. She kept reading something on her screen. "Margot," she looked up. "What do you want me to say, Julian?" "That you're angry." "I'm not angry." "You look angry." "I'm trying very hard not to make your career decision about me." That stopped me. She stood and walked to the window. "You were right Saturday morning," she said. "This is exactly what we were trying to avoid. I haven't accepted anything. You're interviewing for a director role in another state." "Yes, and you didn't tell me. I didn't know if it was." "Serious? Was that why?" I hesitated. She turned. There are moments when hesitation is an answer. Her face changed. "No. I was trying to figure out what I wanted before I dragged you into it." "Dragged me? That came out wrong. It came out honest." I moved closer to the desk. "I applied before the launch party, before I knew about your interview, before any of this. I know that part. I saw the recruiter's name in an old email chain when you forwarded me the portfolio link last month." I blinked. "You knew I'd talked to him. I knew you'd been contacted." "I didn't know you were still considering it." "Neither did I." She folded her arms. "Then why now?" "Because I was scared." The answer was suddenly embarrassingly clear. "If your promotion doesn't happen," I said, "we have a problem. We solve it, if it does happen. People may still talk. People always talk. If I get principal designer right after you move divisions, someone will say you helped me. I did help you. I'm your manager. That's part of my job, if we start dating immediately. Then someone might misunderstand the timeline." "Yes, and your solution was to quietly consider moving 2,000 miles away. When you say it like that, it sounds stupid." "It is stupid." I almost smiled. She didn't. Then she said the thing I needed to hear. "Julian, you do not get to protect my career by removing yourself from my life without asking me what I want." The words landed harder than anger would have. I looked at her. She continued, calmer now. If Austin is what you want, go, I mean that. I will be disappointed personally and still support you professionally, but if you're considering it because you think leaving is some noble sacrifice for me, don't. I rubbed a hand over my face. My last company kept me waiting for years. Part of me thinks if I turn down a director title now, I'm proving I haven't learned anything. Maybe, that surprised me. She stepped closer. Or maybe you learned the wrong lesson. What lesson is that? That every opportunity has to be taken just because someone finally offered it. I stared at her. She looked exhausted but steady. What do you want, Julian? Not what was safer, not what looked impressive on LinkedIn, not what prevented hypothetical strangers from misunderstanding me. What did I want? I want to build this team, I said. I want the principal role. I want to finish the systems we started. I want Seattle. Her eyes softened, and I let out a breath. I want you, for the first time all day, she smiled. Good, now make decisions in that order. That night I emailed the recruiter and thanked him for the opportunity. I did not withdraw. I told him I would give him an answer after my internal review the following Tuesday. It was a small distinction, but an important one. I wasn't staying for Margot. I was choosing my own path with all the information in front of me. The next morning, our redesign went to user testing. Completion rates jumped from 58% to 87%. Desmond looked at the dashboard and shouted loud enough for half the floor to hear him. For 10 minutes, the entire team celebrated like we had won something much larger than a usability study. Margot stood near the back of the room, smiling. When everyone dispersed, she caught my eye. 3 days, she mouthed. I nodded. 3 days. Then on Monday afternoon, Renata Shaw called an all-hands meeting for product. The reorganization was official. Margot Sinclair would become Director of Customer Experience Product, effective the following Monday. The room broke into applause. I clapped harder than anyone. Margot looked genuinely stunned for half a second before the professional version of her returned. She thanked Renata, thanked the team, and said the new division would succeed only if it respected the people already doing the work. Then Renata announced the second change. Our design organization would move under Desmond's manager, with the principal designer position reporting independently across 2 product teams. My pulse began pounding. Julian Reyes has been selected for that role, Renata said. For one strange second, I heard nothing. Then Desmond hit my shoulder and someone behind me cheered. I looked at Margot. She was clapping. Her smile was so bright that the rest of the room disappeared. After the meeting, I found Renata near the elevators. Can I ask you something? Sure. Was Margot involved in my promotion decision? Renata looked amused. She recommended you months ago, as did 2 other managers. She was removed from the final panel once she became a candidate for the director role. I hadn't known that. Why? Clean governance during the reorganization. Relief moved through me. Not because I doubted I deserved the role, because now the truth was simple. Margot had supported me when it was her job to support me, then stepped out when it was no longer appropriate to influence the decision, exactly as I should have expected. Tuesday evening was 21 days after I woke up in her bed. At 6:10, I sent her a message. Roof terrace, 10 minutes. Her reply came almost immediately. Is this a meeting? No. Then I'll be there in 9. Northgate's building had a small terrace on the 7th floor that almost nobody used unless the weather was unusually good. That evening, the clouds had broken, and the sunset turned the edges of downtown Seattle gold. I was standing beside the railing when Margot walked out. She had changed out of her blazer but still carried her laptop bag. You're late, I said. She checked her watch. By 11 seconds. I've changed. I have standards now. Principal designer for 6 hours and already unbearable. Director for 6 hours and still counting seconds. She stopped in front of me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. 3 weeks of restraint stood between us. Then Margot said, You look nervous. I am. That's new. No, usually I just hide it from my boss. Former boss. The words changed the air. I took a breath. I remember almost nothing about the first time I asked you this. I remember enough for both of us. I've been informed there was a ficus involved. There was. I would like the official record. To show that the ficus had nothing to do with my feelings. I'll note that. I smiled then let the joke go. Margot, I meant what I said that night, even if I don't remember saying it. But I don't want you to say yes because drunk me asked first. I want to ask you now, knowing exactly what I'm asking. Her expression softened. I stepped closer. I love the way you challenge me when I'm hiding behind caution. I love that you remember what everyone on the team needs without making a performance out of it. I love that you want more from your career and refuse to apologize for that. And I love that when I woke up terrified I had ruined everything, you gave me coffee before you gave me the truth. She laughed quietly, eyes shining. So, Margot Sinclair, now that I am completely sober and no longer report to you, I paused. Will you go on a date with me? She pretended to consider it. I stared at her. You are enjoying this far too much. I waited 21 days. That was my idea. Exactly. Then she stepped close enough that I could feel the warmth of her hand when she took mine. Yes, she said. The same answer. This time I remembered every second. Our first date was that Friday. No expensive restaurant, no dramatic gesture. We went to a little Italian place in Ballard, where Margot ordered the spiciest pasta on the menu, and then stole half my water because she refused to admit it was too hot. I learned she called her mother every Sunday. She learned I secretly watched old cooking competitions when I couldn't sleep. I learned the terrible cat drawing on her refrigerator belonged to her 6-year-old niece, Lily, who believed Margot worked at the computer store. Margot learned I had once played bass in a college band with a name so embarrassing I made her promise never to repeat it at work. She repeated it at work the following Monday. We also did the boring, responsible things. We disclosed the relationship to HR after our first date. They confirmed there was no longer a reporting relationship and documented the timing of the organizational change. We kept work decisions separate. We argued sometimes. Real relationships, I discovered, are less cinematic than confessions and more revealing than them. 6 months later, Margot and I had our first serious fight because she canceled dinner 3 nights in 1 week for work, and I told her she was treating exhaustion like proof of commitment. She told me I had a habit of becoming understanding instead of saying when I was hurt. We were both right. That was annoying. We got better. A year after the launch party, Northgate held another celebration in the same restaurant above Elliott Bay. Desmond ordered whiskey. I ordered sparkling water. He stared at the glass. Personal growth, historical awareness. Across the room, Margot caught my eye. She was no longer my boss. She was still the person whose opinion could make me rethink an entire week. Later that night, we went back to her apartment, the same apartment where I had woken up confused a year earlier. Except by then, half the books on her shelves were mine. My coffee mug lived beside hers, and the terrible cat drawing had been joined by 4 more. The next morning, I woke to Margot sitting beside me with 2 coffees. She smiled. You don't remember last night. For half a second, the old panic returned. Then I saw the joke in her eyes. I reached for the coffee. I remember dinner. I remember Desmond trying to make a speech. I remember you beating me at cards. And I took her hand. And I remember telling you I love you. Her smile softened. Good, I also remember you saying it back. I did. And for the record, I am never getting drunk around you again. That's probably wise. I looked around the room that no longer felt unfamiliar. The first time I woke there, I thought the worst thing that could happen was discovering I had said too much. I was wrong. Sometimes the greater risk is spending your whole life saying too little because you're afraid honesty will complicate things. What mattered wasn't that I confessed after too much whiskey. What mattered was what happened when I was sober enough to choose. I chose the work I wanted. Margot chose the career she had earned. And when neither of us needed the other to give something up, we chose each other. So, if you were in my place, would you trust the truth that slipped out when your guard was down? Or would you wait until you could say it clearly the next morning?